Hello everyone. Once again, a warm welcome. I'm Rashmi from greytHR and today's moderator of the session. Before I begin with anything else, I would like to thank you for joining us on this exciting journey of greytHR Meets. And today we are going to present a sneak peek into the very near future, that is digitization, the path to HR transformation. In fact, I can say that it's not just a very near future. In fact, to most of them, it is also the present, right? So we are going to discuss all about it today. But once again, before that, I would like to take you through the flow of the session. So for the first few minutes, we will be getting the introduction of our guest and expert speakers, and also have a round of discussion on our today's topics with them, which is then followed by audience Q&A, where the time is all yours, as you can put across your questions and I'll bring them up during the presentation. And we will also have time for answering all your questions at the end of it. All right. And also worried about missing out on any part of our today's session? Not to worry at all, because currently we are recording the session and the same will be shared with all of you soon the session is done. All right. So now without further delay, let's begin this session. So to tell you more about the topic, that is digitization, the path of HR transformation. So a few years back, we were evaluating the importance and need for digital transformation in HR until the pandemic came and changed the entire landscape of the human resource management system. After that, it is all about weighing the whys and the why nots of the digital transformation. So we might even be thinking like, is it just a buzzword and a fad, or is the way of HR departments to move forward? Today, we know that successful HR digital transformation is crucially vital for business success. It's how we take recruitment, talent development, and performance evaluation to the next level. And it's how we turn HR departments into true value creating centers. Now, our expert speaker is here today. So, to tell you all more about Mr. Rohit, Mr. Rohit Manucha is here, has joined us today to talk about our topic, that is digitization, the path of HR transmission. So now, Rohit is definitely going to enlighten us about all of this. But before that, let me tell you more about Rohit to all of you. So Mr. Rohit Manucha's Chief Human Resource Officer, Aujan Groups, is a CHRY certified executive coach with 14 years of experience in aligning organizations with their strategic agenda and managing transformation across 20 countries. He has chaired and spoken at a number of global summits and has authored white papers, research publications on human resource topics. He is a member of the Forbes Human Resources Council and is a chartered FCIPD SHRM accredited senior certified professional and also ICF-CTA and EMCC accredited coach. In the course of his career, he has worked in human capital consulting at KPMG, Hay Group, and in corporate human resources at Pepsi, ORC, Dunia Group, Aujan Coca-Cola, and Aujan Group. He is an SHRM MEA facilitator and a visiting faculty at various reputed organizational and educational institutes. He is also a board member at the Change and Transformative Collaborative UK and a member of the Advisory Council of the World HRD Congress. So, Mr. Rohit, we are delighted to have you here in our session. Welcome once again.
Thanks so much, Rashmi. You can hear me clearly, yeah?
Yes, we can. Yes. So, Rohit, I would like to start our discussion with a couple of questions. So if you could enlighten us about it, that would be great. So my first question to you is, again, very relevant to our topic, that is, how does digital HR transformation impact the organizational culture according to you?
Right. Thanks for the question, Rashmi. I'll do my best at giving you answers. Uh, so transformation of any form has a direct or indirect impact on the culture of the organization. Whatever you may do directly or indirectly does influence culture, so as to speak. When you touch upon digital transformation, the only aspect which gets largely affected is the speed and scale, especially when you're doing anything which is digital in nature. It affects a larger number of people all together, all at once, and in a much more faster manner. Hence, the need for people to adapt to that change becomes all the more imperative. Hence, in order to do that, the communication that you need to do beforehand becomes rather crucial. Uh, so, from a cultural standpoint, if your organization is relatively slow to adapt to change, undergoing a digital transformation project can become quite a headache or a harrowing experience because most of the times you'll be stuck at a PAT or a UAT, user access testing phase rather than actually moving towards a implementation or PAT phase. So from that perspective, digital transformation has a huge impact on the culture of the organization, from an early adoption to a continuous following of those practices. Because look at it this way. So the one is the adoption part. The other one is post-adoption, continuously using it. Classical example of that is, imagine in your organization, you've done sort of a new ERP platform, introducing that. And from that, your entire supply chain systems are now connected. Now, instead of using that for raising invoices, raising POs, raising call-offs, raising demand planning, you end up still using Excel sheets. So the adoption has been done, you implemented it, but then user adoption from usage perspective has not been done because the culture is resisting. Hence, the communication part becomes extremely crucial to truly make a digital transformation piece successful in an organization. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, for sure. So, Rohit, you definitely explained it at the higher level. But now I have a specific question to you. That is role of digitization when it comes to employee life cycle.
The role of digitization compared to employee life cycle.
Yes.
Okay. So you're saying how can digitization play a role in an employee life cycle? Did I understand
Correct.
that?
Yes, yes.
So let's simply understand what employee life cycle is. It's basically looking at an employee's talent, which is not yet your employee in the market. You have identified that talent. To that time, talent gets identified, goes through this process of screening, selection, gets onboarded, joins you, grows within the organization, stays with the organization, reaches that point of inflection, whether the talent chooses to leave, chooses to grow, or continues to grow, or chooses to stay at the existing role. And then, of course, if the talent leaves, you hire them back. That's your entire life cycle. It goes on and on and on. At every point and junction, if you notice what I just charted out for you, you could digitize the entire HR roadmap. Let's take it from a talent pool selection standpoint. The fact that you have CV sourcing from various forums coming in or job postings being done, that goes through a funnel of automatic selection, rejection messages being automated and sent out, a funnel and pool of suitable candidates being selected, ranked in order of comparative metrics. And then, to a certain extent, companies have also started doing video interviews. That may or may not be done. I have my own views on that. And then, of course, the candidate joins you. From the joining to the growth, the entire piece of digitization is a bit, I would say, it's not seamless. There are a lot of players in this market who are providing you solutions for very specific needs. For example, from a learning and development perspective, there are vendors who do skills-based training, gap training needs analysis, or learning journeys, LXP, LMS platforms. There are those who focus only on payroll systems. There are very few players who've largely been able to integrate this entire universe of end-to-end HR interface with the employee. So that's your major piece. And then the piece which totally gets unaddressed from a digital standpoint is alumni networking, that still continues as a very rudimentary manner through, I think, Excel sheets, emails being sent out by HR occasionally on a quarterly basis. So that's by and large the piece. Now, the interesting aspect is if you were to truly look at how, and when I look at digitization, I also look at a bit of analytics playing in. When you truly look at how HR analytics can play a massive role over here, is given the wealth of employee data that we have, the need for us to, there's an immense need for us to start making sense of that data. Rather than doing point-in-time surveys such as employee engagement and understanding that people choose to stay or move with us, it's important to continuously track that sentiment rather than a point-in-time basis and take decisions based on that. Secondly, when you've taken a wealth of data when people join you, historically how HR process and systems are built, they forget about your past experience across multiple organizations. So what ends up happening is I've joined a company and my past experience suddenly just gets written off. I could be a top performer in company X or company Y and join company Z, but suddenly I have to prove myself all over again. And my history, my work, everything is forgotten. Yes, I've got 14 years of work X, but all my achievements are forgotten. That data needs to also start flowing with the so-called talent. Hence, if I look at it this way, I don't want to look at HR digitization from an employee perspective. I want to look at it as a talent perspective. Because for me, talent flows across companies. But when you start looking at things from an employee perspective, you're limiting your viewpoint to people moving as employees from company A to company B to company C. So for me, it's not employee life cycle. I like to see it as a talent life cycle from genuinely a person's birth, education, growth, retirement, and the person, I won't get into rebirth, but basically life cycle, truly. Sorry, it was a bit of a long answer, but I wanted to change the mindset into that.
Definitely, definitely. That totally makes sense, Mr. Rohit. And also, dear attendees, the discussion has begun and you have also heard it from our experts now. So if you have any questions, please start posting them in the Zoom control panel's Q&A, and I'll definitely bring it up in some time and you will get the answers from our experts. So now, in the meantime, Mr. Rohit, I'm coming back to you. So can you please tell us what are the key areas of digital transformation in HR?
I believe I did answer that question in the last two statements that I've made. But let me sum it up for you. So I guess talent acquisition is a major piece, which is the entire piece of candidate selection, candidate identification, selection, onboarding. That's a talent acquisition. Talent management piece, which is post onboarding, when the person comes on board, is enlisted into your HRIS system, gets the employee ID, the database from a self-service and an HR SO service gets taken care of. Then they start performing on their job, performance evaluation, the compensation, payroll data that flows in. And when they have to start getting promoted based on potential, not performance, the entire performance and potential assessment needs to be on a digital platform to allow for more scalability. Of course, if you're only working out of one country with a very small size of employees, I would not ask you to have such a vast HRIS platform. It totally depends on your needs, really. And then, of course, from a performance potential mapping, competencies, so on and so forth, you grow the individual. So career trajectory, career lifecycle management, global mobility programs. So example, if you're moving people from one market to another market, which touches upon compensation, global remuneration, so many other aspects, plus the administrative and the HR aspects of relocating people from markets on secondments or permanent relocations. There are a lot of these aspects which gets digitized. And then, of course, mapping the employee journey to exit or rehire. That entire piece flows into it. So at the talent management piece, you have elements of OD policies. You have elements of learning, growth, as well as compensation. And then, of course, exit is the HR administration. That's your baseline.
Right.
Sorry to just give you one viewpoint. The interesting thing, which I still feel needs to be worked on, is again going back to the fact that when I look at digitization, I look at analytics, is given the fact that there's again so much data, it's it's interesting how we're still scratching the surface of being able to predict optimal organization structures, because the number of variables associated with the people within an organization and the kind of leadership styles and the kind of follower styles which people have, the interplay of relationships between different human beings, plus the basics of chain of command and span of control, and the job responsibilities, the predictability of ideal organization structures to then look at workforce norms, to then do away with this peak and trough of constantly hiring and firing people, and then actually having optimal models of workforce planning will be an interesting piece. And I'm watching that carefully because I see a lot of interesting things happening in that space. Digitization doesn't always have to be enabling your business from systems which happen in Excel sheets and are happening online. No, it also has to be a bit more prescriptive and predictive from that sense. And I think that's the area of interest that I enjoy on the HR digitization piece.
That's great. Yeah. So, Mr. Rohit, I'll move to my next question. Since you're already talking about the digitization and the entire HR process that involves, according to you, what are the primary things that organizations should consider while implementing the digitization?
Okay. Let's get to the basics. The first thing which an organization should consider is, have you recognized that when you're going digital, you're not going to do the same thing the same way? So for example, if a vendor comes to you, you will not say, I used to do payroll this way. Can you build a system for me which allows me to build it this way? Or what does this company do? I want to do exactly what this company is doing at half the cost. I'm sure Abdul is drawing parallels with this, but that's one piece. First of all, understand why you're going digital. Your purpose of doing that needs to be really clear to your organizational needs. It's not because company X did it, hence we should do it. It's not because others are doing it and we feel the peer pressure. You need to be very clear why you're doing it. Secondly, when you're doing it, the level of customization that you do, that means I used to work like this, I'm comfortable working like this, hence the digital avatar of that system needs to be exactly the same way, is going to create a garbage in, garbage out situation. So be open to the idea that the architecture that you're building needs to be amended on best-in-class practices, not because the way you should be doing. You need to change to it rather than making the system change to you. But that just increases more complexity into the systems. The third thing is, which is a bit interesting, is your master database. Your master database needs to be clean. And not many organizations focus on that. Many organizations start emphasizing on the need for better master database management at the time of starting the digital journey. And then that wastes a lot of time. So your project planning, having proper Gantt charts, having proper handoffs, all of that preparation needs to be before. You need to sharpen the sword before you strike. The last part is a bit tricky. The last part is the way again, because you have such staggered and different vendors, different, the environment of HRIS, let's talk from that sense, is extremely crowded. You would see a lot more. And the synergies between them are a lot to be leveraged. And everybody wants to play in their niche areas. The ability for each of these systems to interface with each other can be worked out on, but you need to have players who are able to do that. So there's one option which you go one size fits all, go for, I don't want to throw out brand names, but go for one of the big players and they'll do everything in their manner. Or you give the smaller people a chance and you get many of them to create a system for you. Again, you need to figure out what you want to do. But the interesting thing is if you go with bigger players, they also, the way they operate is not that they would actually do it. They subcontract and then they have their vendors who go and do it. And then the issues associated with raising requisitions, request for change, and that process of change post-implementation is also another nightmare which needs to change, which actually makes a lot of people fearful of digitization. I'll give you a very small example. All of you who have, I guess, Microsoft or any of these Apple laptops, I probably if you have them back home in India, you would have the cracked version, right? And it would constantly keep telling you it's outdated, right? Some of you will probably not even bother going. There are places in Delhi where people tend to do these things. But the interesting thing is those of you who actually spend the hard-earned dollar in getting the right software, and that's the right thing to do, You would realize after 1 year, you have to buy the package again. And your notion, your behavior, human behavior, to then ask yourself, why am I doing this? Versus if I get a cracked version, why should I do it? That need for change it needs to be extremely clear, because once you start on the digitization process, if your adoption does not continue, chances you'll again fall back to your old practices. And that's human behavior. And the example I just gave you happens with all of us. So imagine this happening now at an organization level. The element just gets compounded a lot more. Right. I believe there are a few questions in the chat also.
Right. Yeah, I'll take them up, Rohit. But yeah, before that, since you're already discussing about it, I just have one question. I'm very curious to know about this. It is a bit on the technical side, but I think Rohit will definitely help us understand this. Since you already mentioned while you are answering that why digital, right? So this leads to this question, that is, while we shift from cloud, or let's say from on-premise to cloud, is it still an option or it is a necessity now, according to you?
Okay, so first of all, anything that you do in digitization is not a necessity. Okay, let's be clear on that. It's based on your organizational needs. So let's not broad brush our statements like that, because there's a lot of that going around. So let's look at a specific case. There are markets, there are countries where if you even go for cloud as a company, you have to understand that the cloud, while may appear for you, but for your vendor, the cloud is not sitting out of Antwerp and the space is probably it's in that same country, which will be on-premise for them. So that you need to be clear of the legalities associated with how cloud also works, right? From end-to-end perspective. I'm not looking at things only from a client perspective. I'm looking at client and vendor perspective. The initial basic understanding of why cloud computing is better primarily is because of the fact of, again, ease of access, ease of use, and that's where you see a lot of, for example, Microsoft Dynamics moving completely onto cloud-based solutioning. You have a lot of these players moving over there. The security feature, which is required then of those organizations that need to build enough firewalls, and I think Abdul would be able to give more technical jargons than I would, that amps up. So if you have the capability to go on cloud, you should then have the capability to amp up your security requirements. From a scalability perspective, a cloud makes a lot more sense versus an on-site, because for on-site, you need physical storage space, your electricity costs, all those, which get halved or reduced over a period of long-term usage over cloud. So economics of those point more towards cloud. But then economics of those associated with the fact that over the last 2 years, there have been spikes in number of post-COVID era, the number of system attacks and hacking instances have gone up. That would affect both, honestly speaking. It's just the infrastructure costs which tend to get taken care of and the ease of using it. I think initially there was a resistance to this because, again, we as human beings prefer seeing things, right? Oh, it's in our office. We know it's here. It's safe. Versus, oh, it's in our vendors' servers are running over there with the vendor. Are we comfortable with that? I think that mindset change happened about, I guess, up to 4 or 5 years back already. So I think from that perspective, the question kind of becomes a bit outdated. But yes, it's not a necessity. But my preference would be to, if you have good security systems in place, a good vendor, move towards cloud from a scalability, economics point of view.
Sure. Thank you so much. And
again, please feel free to disagree with me. My view is just my view. Does not mean there are different viewpoints, which I would love to hear if there are any.
Sure. One of our attendees, while we talk about the change and shifting the things and all of that, and since we already discussed about Excel sheets, they have one good question for us. That is, what are the challenges of moving from Excel sheets to digitization of HR department?
Okay, so Excel. I think it's a mindset challenge, first of all. Okay, so an Excel sheet is I think one of the best gifts to people if they can run it really well. You run a good macros, it's a very powerful tool. One cannot deny it. Okay, and our dependency on that is understandable. It's very flexible, it's very easy, and hence, if you notice, the basic infrastructure or basic structure of an Excel sheet from the early 90s when it was introduced to now, late in 2022, it hasn't changed much. It's just the features in terms of visuals have changed, but the features, the basic crux of the Excel sheet remains virtually the same, which talks about how amazing the user experience is. So imagine that user experience getting multiplied several times over as somebody who generally knows how to use Excel sheets, not by just doing Control C, Control V, but doing far beyond that by writing macros. It's an unbelievably helpful tool, first of all. The only challenge that becomes is then the systems which you're introducing. Are they equally employee friendly? Are they equally user centric? Are they equally have a great operating experience? If not, then you will have a tough time. And then I cannot blame the individual who's using the system. And that's the challenge which most of the HRS platform players are trying to solve for. They're saying, is it possible for me to give that same user experience? And I think many of them haven't yet cracked it. But I think that would be amazing if you're able to crack it, because that's when it gets addictive. Why do people use Excel sheets? Don't blame Excel sheets. People use it primarily because it is easy to use, and that's a fact. But why not they adapting to the new technology or the new digital implementation program? Because it is not easy to use, and that's a feedback. Hence, the onus to make it more custom-centric is on the new age players. Imagine a 90s tool is beating you guys out of the market. So you see that? How can something which was introduced in 1990 still have a better user experience than something in 2022? That's the question you need to ask ourselves, not say, so that's one piece. The other piece is now why Excel sheets become a challenge is imagine somebody password protected that Excel sheet and left your company. Happy times. that's a simple example, but what if you deleted your Excel sheet? What if your autosave feature is on your Excel sheet and you uploaded it? What if your Excel sheet is shared amongst your Microsoft Teams? People are using it simultaneously and file cells get overwritten. You'll go to version control and you look at it and you'll try to retrieve it, right? You look at backups which happen to servers. Imagine the amount of headache. Versus in the system, you'll have a proper system log where you'll have variance saves automatically and you pull it out. So that is the reason why people should move out of Excel sheet. But the user experience needs to be improved. Hope that answers the person's question.
Yes, definitely. I'll move on to my next question. So, Mr. Rohit, this is for you. So, can you please explain us how digitization can help in unlocking the workforce potential?
That's a very loaded question. We are assuming in this question that it will help unlock. Whereas I would like to remove that assumption out of the equation and say, if I was to imagine this, you said workforce. Workforce means everyone in my organization. Interestingly, when people talk about workforce, they only look at the white collar and completely forget about frontline sales, frontline manufacturing, and so on and so forth. Imagine I do digitization in a manner where the person who's at the shop floor, the person who's my salesman is going to the store, taking an order, and the system hangs. The guy wants to take the order from the customer, system keeps hanging, system keeps crashing. He's not able to register the sales. What's going to happen? You lose sales for that day, right? You lose sales for that store. The person moves to another place, tries to log into his location so that shows this person is following the route optimization chart, route planning chart, and goes to second system and says, what are the orders from a pre-order I need to go and deliver? System hangs. The system doesn't register. Or the person is making a payout, but he cannot give a receipt at that point of time. There are glitches which can happen along the entire system. The same thing can happen when you don't have the system. This only challenge is the person at the grassroots, if there happens in a, let's say, a pen and paper, has to give a receipt, tear it off and give it to you, will ask for another pen. Is out of pages, will write it down on a piece of paper, sign and give it to you. But the system hangs, the person is not competent enough, usually, to then fix that problem. Would probably then call up to IT, call up to backend support, or probably come back, or will probably reallocate those sales to another route. The challenge becomes at the grassroots level. When you typically look at spreading the use at across the workforce level, which you need to have a very strong support system to enable that digitization at the zenith, not the zenith, but rather at the nth level, the last level of the organization. So that your last mile delivery of your digitization platforms do not affect the employee's productivity. So simplify it in a manner that everyone can understand. Simplify it in a manner that everybody can use it. A classical example of that is a Nokia phone, right? Falls down, pick it up, battery in, put the back, and you're done working. Your iPhone falls down, you have a broken screen, you have, I don't know, God knows what all, right? So again, from your organization's perspective, do you have the appetite to support everyone in your organization? If the answer is yes, to the extent that everyone understands it, then it can blow your productivity sky high. If you don't have the capability to support them, you cannot blame them later on for not being able to deliver. If I can have great Power BI systems, great analytics built into my sales capability, but nobody knows how to read it, and I need a NASA scientist to make sense out of it, then don't blame the people, blame the dashboard and the simplicity of that. So that's my answer.
Right. Okay. So I think that is put in a very beautiful manner. Thanks for that, Rohit. I'll go to the next question. So it is about HR world now. Okay. So the question is, what does digitization in HR mean for businesses?
I think this is somewhat repeated. I think I've already said this. It's the end-to-end employee life cycle. I think you covered that wonderfully in your second question.
Mm-hmm.
All of those aspects, I think, is all digitization in HR workforce. Nothing new from that sense.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much. So I'll now move to our audience question. So one of our attendees would like to know, the question is, with these slowdown talks going on every place, does digitization of HR helps in decreasing the overall cost of the company apart from the automation?
How are you calculating your costs, and what are the time period in which you're looking at your costs? If you're looking at costs in this financial year, and let's say you start off with an HR project as of today, it will not. Your costs will shoot up because you are looking at systems. So you do have the right infrastructure, and if you don't have the right infrastructure, you invest in that. If you have the right infrastructure, then you invest in the software part of it. Then you have annual maintenance plans, annual maintenance contracts. You have system upgradation requests which you need to raise. So you need to be very clear. And I think I said this before, you need to sharpen your sword before you strike. So if you're going down this, not a rabbit hole, but if you're going down this route, which you need to be very clear why you're doing it, you need to be very clear how you're doing it, you need to be very clear who you're doing it with. Find the right partners. It sounds a lot like marriage, doesn't it? It is. It's because once you invest in a system, please understand that it needs to stand the test of time for at least an X amount of years to give you that break even on the cost that you've invested. And again, the reason I'm not giving you accurate numbers is because it depends from what modules of the entire HRS platform you're using. If you're only using, I don't know, employee engagement, it's a very small module, it's a very small cost. Probably the ROI will break even in about 1 to 2 years, provided you're doing something about it. If you're only using it to gather data and you're not doing anything after that, then the ROI is not going to ever break even. So your cost break-even analysis has to be factored into taking into account infra costs, which are amortized or accrued depending on how your financial metrics work over a period of time. But the ROI or the break-even comes in based on your utilization of the systems. For example, having workforce doing just acquisition versus moving into AI versions of talent acquisition can reduce your headcount by an X amount. But at the same time, if you don't hire the right talent on account of doing that, then your ROI is negative. So you reduce the headcount from talent acquisition team, but you've not hired the right person for the right job. So it's the risk which you need to figure out. But having said that, the trend doesn't get affected by slowdown. So slowdown has got nothing to do with your drive towards digitization. That's more like a PESEL analysis. What you need to do is a SWOT analysis to see what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are your opportunities, what are your threats for your organization, and how you want to leverage on digitization. And it could be a small module. It could be the first step in the entire scheme of things, or it could be the last step in the entire scheme of things. Get your roadmap for digitization relatively clear, and then pick and choose what you want to do. If you don't have as many vacancies and you don't have a high attrition rate and you don't have a huge headcount, then buying a talent acquisition software doesn't make sense for you. Probably an Excel sheet would be equally good. And probably I would use that money to invest in great talent acquisition specialists or negotiate with vendors who are great at talent acquisition. But so you need to be clear why you're doing it. I keep going back to that, but I think that point needs to be driven home, because don't do it just because you want to do it. Be very clear why you're doing it. If you compare manually with pen and paper, but if you consider Excel sheet as a digitization, then technically you already digitized. So where are you on the digitization scale becomes important. So they're like, they say they're Gen 4s, right? If I'm not mistaken, Abdul, 1.0 was your Excel, 2.0 was your Excel plus first generation HRIS, and then we are currently somewhere between fourth generation when it comes to LXP, LMX migration, fourth generation when it comes to talent interface, SSOs, and all the other things. But from that perspective, we are technically digitized, right? The fact that a company has a laptop or a desktop versus a pen and paper, you are digitized. You can argue that also.
Yes, totally.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Rohit. Move on to the next question. So this is somewhat like example. Probably Mr. Rohit has partially answered this, but we would like to hear more about this. So Mr. Rohit, what are the key digital transformations in human resource management that we have seen in the recent past?
I think the biggest transformation for us was the migration or adoption of flexi work and hybrid working, and a large part of it was given the fact that IT enabled it for HR. And I think IT and HR work very cohesively for a lot of organizations to navigate the COVID surge or resurgence now that you can see. Apart from that, the migration towards just doing a simple training needs analysis to employees taking control of their own career path and identifying how they want to grow in an organization. Hence, the learning journey mapping linked to career pathing, bringing that together allows for a bit more smarter learning pathways and career pathways. In terms of global mobility programs and remuneration, again, I'm talking about the best of class. I'm not talking, and the problem is currently organizations at two extremes. The organization is starting their journey, and the organization are very, very evolved. And you have people at least at those two scatters. Again, from a GRP and a rewards standpoint, the fact that when you look at globalization of talent, linking it to market data on compensation, compa ratios, understanding cost of living factors, to reallocating talent and building secondment, reallocation pipelines and plans, it becomes a bit more robust now because you are running far more better data algorithms on various combinations of pay packages and offers, and building your own salary as you go along. To the extent that now you can look at, and I think that's where the challenges are now. When it comes to HR policies, when you look at multiple markets, a lot of that creates a lot of dichotomy. For example, payroll is one factor. If I was to compare, let's say, Oman versus Jordan versus Bahrain versus Qatar versus UAE versus Saudi, the payroll elements are very different. Whether it could be holidays, whether it could be now weekdays also, you'll realize that the complexity goes up. And if you were to do it manually, the margin of error becomes huge. So apart from time, the cost of mistakes becomes huge. So you see mainly payroll getting automated. You see usually RPAX, the robotic process automation of talent acquisition getting automated. It is this inner piece, which is the true brains of HR, the OD analytics. That piece is still a bit, like I said, done on a very piecemeal basis, and that needs to be done a bit more seamlessly across organizations and vendors both. So that's mainly the trends, and that's mainly the areas which are addressed and not addressed.
Sure. Thank you so much for your answer, Rohit. And dear attendees, as you can see, we are almost nearing our wind up time. So if you have any questions, please put them across. And in the meantime, Mr. Rohit, I have one last question for you from my end. That is, what would be your suggestion to SMEs and MSME on HR digitization?
I think the statement remains the same what I'd said before. Understand why you're doing it. And once you've understood and you're clear on the why, be clear on how you want to go about doing it. Spend enough time understanding that. Find the right partner who can partner with you to enable that. And once you've done that, then go full-fledged on that journey. Have full top management buy-in. Push your weight behind it. Don't have second thoughts. And once you've implemented it, then ensure culturally organizations have adapted to it, have seamlessly acknowledged it, and they will follow through with it and not fall back to old habits. So have a proper change management protocols in place to allow for this. So it's a journey. Be prepared for that journey. It's like not everybody can climb Mount Everest, right? You have flights leaving for the base camp virtually every day. You can go from China, you can go from Nepal, but not everybody can reach the summit, right? And there's a lot of preparation that you need to do, not just physical, but also mental. It's considered like that. It's not that challenging to go down the digitalization pathway. But since you specified SME and MSME, it does tend to become a bit more challenging because they are a bit more price sensitive. And for them, the ROI needs to hit home a lot sooner than other organizations that are willing to tie it off for at least 2 to 3 years before they see the break even because of the scale associated with this and the need to do this. So I hope this gives you a right answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rohit. So, dear attendees, I think I don't see any more questions coming up. So, I think we are good to wind up the session for today. But before that, I would like to thank our expert speakers today, Mr. Rohit Manucha, for enlightening us about the digitization. And also, dear attendees, if you have any questions for us, you can always write back to us at the given mail ID here. It is yasir.arafat@greytip.com. So please feel free to reach out to us. And also, last but not the least, I would like to thank the entire team and the attendees for making this session huge success. Thank you for your presence, and we'll be looking forward to see you in our upcoming sessions. Till then, stay safe, take care, have a great time.